Welcome. The lantern is lit. The road is quiet. Walk with me. I had been walking for a long time when the road began to soften beneath my feet. Not in sound. Stone remains stone, even after centuries of weather and neglect, but in feeling. The cobbles no longer resisted my steps. They no longer demanded that I hurry or pay attention to where I placed my weight. They accepted me, as though they had been waiting for someone who would walk without urgency. The evening had arrived without announcement. The sky dimmed gently, layers of cloud thinning the last light until the world settled into shades of blue and grey. The air cooled, not sharply, but with patience, the kind of cooling that invites a deeper breath rather than a shiver. In my hand, the lantern burned. Its flame was small and steady, cupped within thick, imperfect glass. The metal frame bore the marks of age, softened edges, faint scratches, places where the brass had darkened unevenly. It was not ornate. It had never been meant to be admired, only carried. The lantern did not brighten the road ahead of me. It did not push the dark back. It merely gathered the nearest stones and shadows into something visible, something familiar. I had been told once, quietly, that lanterns like this were placed wherever someone chose to stay. Not forever, just long enough to matter. The road narrowed as I walked, flanked by low walls broken by time and roots. Old arches leaned inward, no longer remembering what they had once supported. Moss covered their surfaces freely, untroubled by passing hands or wheels. Here and there, the stones bore faint markings, grooves worn smooth by fingers that had traced the same symbols again and again. Most had lost their meaning. A few had not. The night felt calm, not empty, calm, as if it had settled into place and found it suited. I slowed without thinking about it. My steps became quieter. My breathing steadied. The lantern's glow moved across the stones like a slow tide. I passed a stone marker half sunk into the earth. Its inscription had long since faded, but beneath where the letters had been, a simple image remained. A lantern, square base, slanted roof, a single flame. I stopped there, not because I was tired, but because stopping felt appropriate. Silence rested easily in this place. It did not press against my ears or ask to be filled. It simply existed, like the quiet that settles inside a hall after a fire has burned low and the last conversation has drifted away. I lifted the lantern slightly, letting its glow touch the carving. "This place remembers," I said softly, not to anyone, not for any reason I could name. When I moved again, the road continued without comment. The stones accepted the weight of my steps, as if they had accepted the weight of others for a very long time. And ahead, the dark gathered into shapes that did not belong to trees alone. The first hook appeared beside the road, fastened to a low post of stone. It was simple iron, bent into a curve. A lantern hung from it. Its glass was clouded. Its frame was dark. Its flame was quiet. I walked past it slowly, feeling the strange comfort of seeing light that did not ask anything from me. Further along, another hook, another lantern, then another. They were spaced irregularly, as if placed by human hands that stopped when they felt it was time, rather than when they reached a measured distance. The road seemed to deepen between them, not physically, in feeling, as though each lantern marked not a place, but a moment. I understood then that this road had once been travelled by people who didn't hurry, people who had accepted that night comes, and that rest is not failure. I kept walking, and the lanterns kept their patient watch. They did not turn their faces. They had none to turn. But their presence felt like a quiet agreement. You may pass, they seemed to say, and you may pause. The hamlet revealed itself slowly, as if it had no reason to hurry. The road passed between two stone posts that had once held a gate. No hinge remained, no iron ring, only the quiet shape of passage. I stepped between them without slowing. Inside, the ground changed. The stones were flatter here, worn smooth by feet that had walked not in haste, but in habit. The space between cottages was narrow, built for closeness rather than distance. The first cottage stood to my right. Its door was open, not broken, open. The wood had aged into a soft grey, its surface marked by years of weather that had never quite claimed it. The handle remained, though it no longer turned. Beside the door, a lantern hook extended from the stone, empty, but not abandoned. The iron had been shaped with care, its curve gentle, made to hold weight without strain. I let the lantern in my hand cast its glow across the doorway. Inside, the room held only stillness. Dust rested evenly across the floor, not disturbed, not gathered into drifts, simply settled, as if it had arrived and decided to remain. A table stood near the far wall. Its surface was bare, its legs steady. One chair rested beside it, angled slightly outward, as if someone had stood and never returned to move it back. I remained in the doorway for a moment longer, then stepped away. Further along, another cottage waited. This one smaller. Its window still held glass, though the surface had clouded with time. The lantern in my hand reflected faintly in it, appearing older in its reflection than in its presence. Beside its door, another hook. This one still held a lantern. The flame inside was faint, not struggling, not failing, simply quiet. I stood before it, feeling no urgency to move. It did not react to my presence. It did not brighten. It did not dim. It simply continued. I moved on, deeper into the hamlet, the lantern in my hand, and the lanterns on the walls, sharing the same quiet purpose. The street curved gently ahead, and the cottages followed its shape without resistance, their walls leaning slightly inward, as if the years had taught them to rest rather than stand. Lantern hooks remained beside nearly every door, some holding empty rings, others holding glass darkened by time, and a few still carrying faint light whose glow was barely visible against the deepening night. I walked without counting my steps, because there was no need. The hamlet had no distance to measure, only presence to offer, and the road widened slightly as the space between buildings opened into a small clearing. At its centre stood a well. Its stone rim rose just above the ground, its circular form uninterrupted by damage or collapse, and moss had gathered along its lower edge, while the top remained clear. Its surface worn smooth by hands that had rested there many times. A rope lay coiled beside it, not frayed or broken, but carefully placed, as if someone had set it down with a quiet intention of returning later. The bucket rested nearby, its wood darkened with age, but intact, and the iron handle showed no sign of strain or abandonment. I stepped closer and placed my hand against the stone, feeling its cool surface beneath my fingers. Not cold, but steady and familiar in a way I could not fully explain. The lantern in my hand reflected faintly across the well's edge, its light slipping over the stone and disappearing into the darkness below, and I did not lean forward to follow it, because some depths did not require witness to be understood. I sat on the rim of the well, the lantern resting beside me, and the hamlet remained unchanged, its cottages standing quietly, its lanterns holding their patient glow, and its stillness accepting my presence without question. Nothing asked me to stay, and nothing asked me to leave. And after a while, I stood again. Not because I was finished, but because the road was not. One cottage stood slightly apart from the others, its stonework more carefully fitted, its roofline straighter despite the passing years. And there was something about it that drew my attention without urgency, as if it had simply been waiting longer than the rest. A lantern hung beside its doorway, its glass dimmed with age, and though its flame was faint, it remained present, its quiet glow resting against the surrounding stone without effort. I stepped toward it slowly, feeling no resistance in the air, no warning in the silence, only the same patient stillness that had followed me since the road first softened beneath my feet. The doorway stood open, and the interior beyond it held darkness that did not conceal but rested, and I allowed the lantern in my hand to move forward first, its light reaching into the space before I did. Inside, the room was simple, its walls bare, its floor worn smooth by countless footsteps that had long since ended. And yet, nothing felt abandoned, nothing felt unfinished, and nothing felt lost. At the center of the room stood a hearth. Its stones were blackened by fire that had once burned there, and though no flame remained now, the shape of warmth lingered, as if the air itself remembered what it had once held. I stepped closer and knelt beside it, resting my hand near the edge, feeling only cool stone beneath my fingers, but sensing no absence in it, no emptiness, only the quiet continuation of something that did not require flame to exist. Behind me, the lantern beside the door continued its steady glow, and the lantern in my hand answered it, the two lights existing together without effort, without change, without need. The room did not ask me to remain, and it did not ask me to leave. And for a time, I did neither, allowing the stillness to settle around me in the same way the dust had settled on the floor and the moss had settled on the stones outside. Eventually, I stood again, not because I had found something, and not because I had lost something, but because the road continued beyond the doorway, and the lantern in my hand had never stopped burning. When I stepped back outside, the air felt unchanged, holding the same quiet balance it had before I entered, and the lantern beside the doorway continued its steady glow, as if my absence had never interrupted it. The hamlet remained still, its cottages resting in their familiar arrangement, and for a moment I stood without moving, allowing my eyes to follow the narrow street as it extended beyond the well and curved gently toward the far edge of the settlement. There, partially hidden by the angle of the road and the slow gathering of shadow, stood a structure larger than the others. It did not rise above the hamlet in dominance, nor did it separate itself with distance, but its presence was unmistakable, its stonework heavier, its lines more deliberate, as if it had been built not only to shelter, but to endure. I began walking toward it, my steps soft against the worn stones, and as I approached, I could see that its entrance stood open, its doorway framed by pillars, whose surfaces had been smoothed by years of passing hands. Lantern hooks had been placed along its outer wall, and unlike many of the cottages, these still held lanterns whose faint light remained visible even against the deepening night, their flames steady and untroubled. I slowed as I reached the threshold, not from uncertainty, but from recognition, because this place did not feel separate from the road, and it did not feel separate from the hamlet, but instead felt like the quiet center of both. The lantern in my hand cast its glow forward, and the interior revealed itself gradually. Stone floor stretching inward, walls rising with patient strength, and lanterns resting at measured intervals, their presence forming a gentle path into the space beyond. I stepped inside, without hesitation. The air within was neither warmer nor colder, but it held a stillness deeper than the hamlet outside. A stillness that did not resist interruption, but instead absorbed it, allowing presence without demanding explanation. Behind me, the doorway remained open, and the faint lights of the hamlet rested at the edge of sight, while ahead, the hall continued into quiet shadow, waiting without expectation. The hall extended farther than it had first appeared, its length revealed gradually as the lantern in my hand carried its light forward, uncovering more of the stone floor and the quiet strength of the walls. Lanterns rested along both sides, placed at intervals that felt intentional rather than measured, each one holding its own small and steady flame. And together, they formed a path that did not demand to be followed, but allowed it. I walked slowly between them, aware of the way their light overlapped, softening the edges of shadow without removing it, and creating a balance that felt neither dark nor bright, but complete. The ceiling rose in a gentle arch above me, its stone surface darkened with age, and I could see faint markings there, lines worn smooth by time, as though something had once been hung in those spaces and later removed without disturbance. Stone benches lined the walls at irregular distances, their surfaces curved slightly inward, shaped by years of quiet use. And I passed one, then another, sensing not absence, but the memory of presence that had never needed to leave. The air held no movement, and yet it did not feel still in the way of abandonment, but rather in the way of something carefully held, as if the hall itself understood its purpose and had no reason to change. I allowed my hand to rest briefly against the wall as I walked, feeling the cool surface beneath my fingers, and the sensation carried no resistance, only the quiet assurance of something that had endured without effort. Further ahead, the lanterns continued, their steady glow neither weakening nor strengthening, and the path they formed remained open, waiting without urgency for whatever presence might choose to walk it. I continued forward, the sound of my steps softened by the stone beneath me, and the lantern in my hand burned with the same patient flame it had carried since the road first began to soften beneath my feet. The lanterns continued along the walls, their steady glow revealing more of the hall as I walked, and the space around me opened gradually, allowing its full shape to emerge without urgency or resistance. At the center of the hall stood a long stone table, its surface smooth and unbroken, its edges rounded by years of quiet contact, and there was nothing placed upon it, nothing left behind, only the quiet assurance of something that had fulfilled its purpose without needing to be replaced. I approached it slowly, not because I hesitated, but because the space itself encouraged patience, and the lantern in my hand carried its light across the stone, revealing faint variations in the surface where time had softened its sharpness. I placed my hand upon the table, and the stone felt cool and steady beneath my fingers, holding neither warmth nor cold, but existing in the quiet balance that belonged to places untouched by urgency. The hall remained unchanged around me, its lanterns continuing their steady and patient glow, and the air held its stillness without effort, allowing my presence without demanding explanation or purpose. I moved along the length of the table, my steps quiet and unforced, and the lantern's light travelled with me, resting briefly upon the stone before continuing onward, as though the hall itself were accustomed to such passing. Beyond the table, the space narrowed again, and the far end of the hall revealed itself gradually, its shape emerging from the quiet in the same unhurried way as everything else, and I found myself continuing forward without intention or resistance, carrying the lantern deeper into the stillness that had never been disturbed. As I continued forward, the hall grew quieter in a way that did not remove sound, but deepened the stillness that already existed there, and the lantern in my hand carried its steady glow ahead of me, revealing the gentle curve of the far wall as it slowly drew nearer. The stone beneath my feet remained smooth and even, worn by countless passages that had left no visible trace, and the lanterns along the walls continued their patient watch, their small flames steady and unchanged, as if they had never known interruption. At the far end of the hall, the wall curved inward, forming a shallow alcove whose shape emerged gradually from the dim light, and within it stood a single pedestal, carved from the same stone as the floor and walls, yet holding a quiet presence distinct from everything around it. Upon the pedestal rested a lantern. Its frame was darker than the others, its glass thicker and marked by subtle imperfections that caught the light in uneven ways, and its flame burned with the same calm steadiness as the lantern in my hand, though it carried a sense of age that did not belong only to time. I approached it slowly, allowing each step to settle fully before the next began, and the air remained unchanged, holding its quiet balance without resistance, and the lantern upon the pedestal did not brighten or dim, but continued its steady and patient glow. I stopped a short distance from it and remained there, allowing the stillness of the hall to exist without interruption, and I understood, without needing words, that this lantern had not been placed here to guide or to signal, but simply to remain, holding its place as it always had. After a while, I stepped back, and the lantern remained upon its pedestal, unchanged, its quiet flame continuing without effort. And I turned gently, carrying my own lantern with me, as I began to walk back through the hall. I turned from the alcove slowly, and the lantern upon the pedestal remained behind me, its steady glow continuing without effort, as though my presence had neither altered nor disturbed its purpose. The hall stretched out before me once more, its lanterns resting along the walls in the same quiet arrangement, and the path I had followed inward now waited without expectation, unchanged and undiminished. I walked at the same unhurried pace, and the lantern in my hand carried its gentle light beside me, allowing the familiar shapes of stone and shadow to reappear, not as something new, but as something remembered. The central table stood where I had left it, its surface still and undisturbed, holding no trace of my passing, and I moved beyond it without stopping, allowing the quiet continuity of the hall to remain intact. The benches along the walls rested in their patient stillness, their worn surfaces shaped by years that no longer needed to be counted. And as I passed them, I felt no sense of departure, only the quiet understanding that presence does not require permanence to remain meaningful. Ahead, the open doorway revealed the faint outline of the hamlet beyond, and the lanterns outside continued their soft and steady glow, waiting without urgency beneath the deepening night. I approached the threshold and paused there briefly, allowing the lantern in my hand to rest at my side, and the hall behind me remained as it had always been, holding its quiet purpose without change or interruption. Then I stepped forward, carrying the lantern with me, and the doorway passed around me without resistance, and the open air of the hamlet received me once again. The hamlet remained as I had left it, its cottages resting in quiet rows, their doors open, and their lantern hooks waiting without expectation. And the lantern in my hand continued its steady glow beside me as I walked slowly along the narrow street. The well stood at the center, its stone rim smooth and unchanged, and the coiled rope rested where it had been placed, holding its patient shape without disturbance, as if time itself had learned to move around this place without altering it. I passed the cottages again, and their windows reflected faint traces of lantern light, not brightly, but enough to remind the night that presence remained here, even in stillness. The air carried no movement beyond my own, and the quiet did not feel empty, but complete, as though nothing had been taken from it, and nothing had been left behind. The lantern in my hand burned with the same calm flame it had carried since the road first softened beneath my feet, and its light rested gently against the stone as I moved, never reaching beyond what was needed. Ahead, the stone posts that marked the entrance to the hamlet waited in their familiar place, and beyond them, the road continued into darkness that did not conceal, but simply remained unknown. I slowed as I reached the post, allowing my hand to rest briefly against the cool stone, and it held the same quiet steadiness as everything else I had touched in this place. Nothing asked me to remain, nothing asked me to return, and yet the lantern in my hand continued to burn, and the road beyond the hamlet remained open, waiting without urgency for whatever steps might follow. I stepped forward, passing between the stone posts, and the hamlet remained behind me, unchanged, its lanterns continuing their quiet and patient watch. The road received me as it had before, its stones soft beneath my feet, their worn surfaces accepting my steps without sound, and the lantern in my hand carried its steady light beside me as I walked forward into the quiet that lay beyond the hamlet. Behind me, the cottages remained where they had always been, their lanterns resting beside open doorways, their presence neither fading nor calling me back, but simply continuing in the same calm way they always had. The trees ahead stood close to the road, their branches unmoving in the still air, and the darkness between them did not feel empty, but patient, as though it had long since learned to exist without interruption. Another lantern stood beside the road. Its flame burned with the same quiet steadiness as the others, and as I passed it, its light joined briefly with my own before falling gently behind me, unchanged by my passing. I continued walking, The lantern in my hand remained constant, its glow resting on the stones ahead, revealing only what was near and leaving the distance untouched, allowing the road to remain unknown beyond the reach of its quiet light. The air remained calm around me, and the silence did not resist my presence, but accepted it in the same way the hamlet had, without question and without need. I did not look back. There was nothing behind me that required leaving, and nothing ahead that required reaching. And yet, the road continued, and I continued with it, carrying the lantern forward into the quiet that remained. The road extended forward without resistance, its worn stones receiving my steps with the same quiet acceptance they had shown since the beginning, and the lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, revealing only what was near and allowing the distance to remain undisturbed. The trees stood close on either side, their branches unmoving, their presence neither enclosing nor opening the path, but existing alongside it in the same calm and patient way as everything else I had passed. Another lantern rested beside the road, its flame steady within its aged glass, and as I walked past it, its quiet light joined briefly with my own before settling gently behind me, while the lantern in my hand remained unchanged. The air remained cool and even, carrying no wind, no movement beyond my own, and the silence did not press against me, but allowed me to move within it without effort. My steps continued at the same unhurried pace, and the lantern's glow rested upon each stone before me, revealing the quiet continuity of the road as it carried on into darkness that did not conceal, but simply waited. Nothing marked where I had been, nothing marked where I was going, and yet the road remained, and the lantern in my hand continued to burn, and I continued with it. The lantern in my hand burned with the same quiet steadiness it had carried since the beginning, its glow resting gently upon the stones ahead and revealing their worn surfaces without reaching beyond what was needed. The air remained calm around me, holding its cool and even presence without movement, and the silence did not feel empty, but settled, as though it had long since found its proper place. My steps continued at their natural pace, unforced and unmeasured, and the rhythm of walking became something that did not require attention, but existed on its own, carried forward by habit and by the quiet acceptance of the path beneath me. Another lantern waited beside the way, its frame darkened by time, and its glass softened by age, and its flame remained steady within it, unchanged by the passing years. And as I moved beyond it, its quiet light rested briefly beside my own, before returning to its familiar stillness. The trees stood in their patient stillness, their forms rising beside the path without leaning inward or away, and their presence did not close the space, but allowed it to remain open and undisturbed. The lantern in my hand continued to burn, its glow resting upon each stone before me, and nothing in the quiet resisted its presence, and nothing required it to be brighter than it was. I did not think about where the road would lead. I did not need to. The lantern was enough, and the quiet remained. The lantern in my hand continued its steady glow, and its light rested gently upon the stones ahead, revealing their worn surfaces without reaching beyond what was needed. And the quiet around me remained undisturbed by my presence. The air carried the same cool and even stillness, and each step settled naturally beneath my feet, not as effort, but as continuation, and the rhythm of walking became something separate from thought, something that existed on its own. Another lantern stood beside the path, its frame darkened by time, and its flame remained calm within its aged glass, holding its place without urgency. And as I walked past it, its quiet light rested briefly beside my own before returning to its patient stillness behind me. The lantern in my hand remained unchanged. Its flame did not falter. Its presence did not demand attention. It simply continued. The trees rose beside the road without movement, their form steady and unchanging, and their branches rested above without sound, allowing the path to remain open, allowing the quiet to remain complete. I continued forward, and nothing marked my passing except the gentle movement of light across stone. And even that faded as I moved beyond it, leaving the road as it had always been. The lantern's glow revealed another stretch of worn stone, and the surface beneath my feet held the same quiet acceptance as before, neither resisting nor encouraging, but simply allowing. I did not think about where the road would lead. I did not need to know. The lantern remained in my hand. The quiet remained around me, and the road continued, carrying nothing, holding nothing, and yet remaining. Its steady glow moved with me, resting softly upon the stones ahead, and the quiet light revealed the worn texture of their surfaces without reaching beyond what was needed, allowing the distance to remain undisturbed. The air remained cool and even, and each breath settled naturally, neither deep nor shallow, but present, and the stillness around me did not resist my movement, but allowed it without interruption. Another lantern stood beside the path, its frame softened by time, and its flame rested calmly within its glass, holding its quiet presence without urgency. And as I passed it, its light remained behind, unchanged. My steps continued at their natural rhythm, unmeasured and unforced, and the simple act of walking no longer felt like effort, but like participation in something that had always existed. The trees rose beside the path without movement, their forms steady and undisturbed, and their branches rested above in quiet balance, neither enclosing nor opening the space, but allowing it to remain. The glow beside me did not falter. It did not demand attention. It simply remained. The stones beneath my feet held the same quiet acceptance, their surfaces shaped by countless passages that had left no visible trace, and nothing in their presence suggested beginning or ending. I did not think about where the road would lead. There was no need to know. The quiet was enough, and the light remained beside me. The quiet remained settled around me, and the gentle glow beside me continued to reveal the stones ahead, their worn surfaces appearing and fading as I moved, and the rhythm of that light became as familiar as the rhythm of my breath. The air held its cool balance without change, and nothing in its stillness suggested movement beyond my own, and each step found its place naturally, without effort or intention. Another lantern rested beside the path, its frame aged and darkened, and its steady flame remained unchanged. And as I walked beyond it, its light lingered briefly beside my own, before returning to its place behind me. The trees stood with the same quiet patience, their forms rising beside the path without movement, and their branches rested overhead in calm balance, neither closing the space nor opening it, but simply remaining. The ground beneath my feet shifted slightly, the stones becoming smoother, their surfaces worn by time into gentle curves that accepted each step without resistance. Light moved across those curves as I walked, settling and lifting without urgency, and nothing in that quiet movement required attention. Another lantern appeared ahead, and its flame held the same calm presence as the others, and its quiet glow joined briefly with mine before fading gently behind me as I continued forward. The silence remained complete. It did not deepen. It did not fade. It simply remained. My steps continued without effort, and the glow beside me revealed only what was near, allowing the distance to remain unknown and undisturbed. I did not wonder how far the road extended. I did not need to know. The quiet was enough, and I continued within it. The glow beside me moved gently across the stones ahead, revealing their worn surfaces in quiet succession. And the light did not rush forward, but remained close, allowing each step to settle fully before the next began. The air carried the same calm balance, cool and steady, and nothing in its presence suggested urgency or interruption. And each breath came and went without effort, becoming part of the same quiet continuity that surrounded everything. The ground beneath my feet remained smooth and familiar, shaped by time into gentle curves that accepted each step without resistance. And the simple act of walking no longer required attention, but existed on its own, carried forward by the same quiet acceptance. A lantern stood beside the path, its frame softened by years, and its steady flame rested within its glass without movement. And as I passed it, its quiet glow remained behind, unchanged, continuing its patient watch as it always had. The trees rose beside the path in their steady stillness, their forms neither closing the space nor opening it, but allowing it to remain as it was, undisturbed and complete. The glow beside me did not change. It did not falter. It simply remained. Another lantern appeared further along, and its calm flame joined briefly with my own as I walked past it, and the meeting of light passed gently, leaving both unchanged, and the quiet settled once more into its familiar balance. My steps continued without effort, and nothing marked my passing except the brief movement of light across stone, and even that faded softly as I moved forward. The air remained cool. The silence remained whole. Nothing needed to be reached. Nothing needed to be left behind. The quiet held its place around me, and the light beside me remained steady, and I continued forward, carried not by destination, but by the simple continuation of the road itself. Light moved with me in a calm, steady way, resting on the stones ahead and lifting again as my steps carried it forward, and the glow remained close, never reaching too far into the darkness, as if it preferred to keep its attention on what was near. The air was cool and even, and the silence held its place without effort, and my breathing settled into a quiet rhythm that felt natural, like something the road had been waiting for. Each exhale faded gently into the stillness, and nothing answered it, not because the world was empty, but because it was resting. The path beneath my feet changed slightly as I went, the stones becoming smoother, their edges rounded by time, and the surface accepted each step without resistance. Here and there, thin seams of moss traced the gaps between cobbles, not thick enough to soften the road, but enough to give it a faint, living texture. A lantern stood beside the way, its frame darkened and softened by age, and its flame rested calmly inside clouded glass. As I walked past, its quiet light lingered for a moment beside my own, and then remained behind, continuing its patient watch without shifting or dimming. The trees rose close to the path, their trunks steady and unmoving, and their branches rested above, like a roof that had long since learned to be gentle. The space between them felt open rather than enclosed, and the darkness beyond the glow did not threaten, but simply waited, it's unchanged. Further along, a low stone marker leaned near the edge of the road. The carving upon it was worn, but I could still make out the shape of a lantern, simple and familiar, pressed into the stone as if to remind travellers that this road remembered. I did not stop for long. I only let my gaze rest there until the meaning settled. Quiet and complete. Another lantern appeared ahead, and then another beyond it, each one placed as if by a hand that stopped when it felt right. Passing them felt like passing moments rather than objects, and the meeting of light was brief, gentle, and unremarkable in the best way, leaving everything exactly as it had been. The road dipped slightly, and the stone beneath my feet changed from cobbles to a flatter run of worn slabs. A small bridge crossed a narrow channel where water once ran, and though the channel was dry, the bridge remained, holding its shape with the same quiet persistence as the lanterns. My steps sounded no louder there. The stone seemed to absorb even that. On the far side, the path returned to cobble, and the steady glow beside me continued to reveal only what was needed. I did not think about distance. I did not measure progress. The quiet was enough, and the light was enough, and I continued forward without urgency, carried gently by the same calm continuity that had followed me since the first lantern.